Hello.
Yeah.
Can you hear me all right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, great. I'm using Skype so I can record it and transcribe it later. So
Oh, yeah. So it's just for print.
Yeah, oh, absolutely.
Yes, yeah, okay.
Yeah. Just so much easier than trying to actually type while you're talking. I won't be paying attention to you then.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it's a pleasure to talk to you. I know you've favorited it at least once on Twitter, but I've become an addict to your podcast over the past couple of weeks.
Oh, thank you.
You definitely have a tendency to geek out with actors the same way I do, so I
yeah.
definitely...
Yeah, that's kind of where the whole idea started. I didn't think anybody would want to listen to it. I mean, because I didn't think they'd like old movie stars or old TV stars and stuff. And now they seem like I get all these letters where people say, I didn't know who that guy was or who you were talking about, but I still liked it.
Well, it's because the stories are just so great, and usually the actors are old enough that they don't give a fuck what they say at this point.
Oh, that's the best part. when you've got people like, they don't care about what impression they make, and they'll say anything. It's one pleasant surprise. I mean, I interviewed Butch Patrick.
Oh yeah,
and he was like, I was expecting this bitter old drunk. And instead, he had a total sense of humor about his career and his drinking and drug problem. and he was telling stories about how he used to have on the Munsters this Wolfman doll he carried around. And he had some guy make a bunch of copies of it, and he would sell them. And he said how every penny that he made from stuffing those dolls went to alcohol.
Yes.
But now he's like cleaned up and everything. And yeah.
So how do you go about selecting the guests for the show? I mean, do you have like a dream list or a cork board with index cards?
Well, it's we usually will pop up with we'll start thinking of people, and then we got to find out. A lot of them are, you find out that a lot of them, when you look into it, are dead or dying, and that's always. Or I don't know how many times we've come up with a name, and just as we were about to call them, turn on the TV and find out they died that day. And I was originally going to call the show the Before It's Too Late show.
Well, I know that you'll be able to appreciate this since you have had him on the show, but I recently did a Random Rolls interview with Norman Lloyd.
Oh, my God. No, I've never had him on the show.
Oh, for some reason I thought that you had.
We were talking about getting him on. I don't know.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what it was. Oh, my Lord. He was just amazing. And it was like 2 days before he turned 101.
Wow.
And but I had the idea after I went and saw Trainwreck, and I sent an email to the AV Club making sure they were up for the interview. And then before I even got an email back from them, I'm like, I should probably just check with this publicist guy. I feel like I shouldn't sit around on this idea.
Oh, yeah.
So his publicist wrote back within 24 hours and said, here's Mr. Lloyd's number. He would love to speak with you. So it was basically Norman Lloyd gave me the go-ahead before the AV Club did. And I called him 2 days later, and my daughter, who's 10, she was like, how old is he? He's 100. You're going to wait till tomorrow then? Good point.
Yeah, it's like we were set up to book, we asked this comedian Jack Carter if he wanted to do the show, and he said yes. And, my wife was saying, well, how about in June or July? We've got, and I said, no, you book him as soon as he'll do it. And we did book him as soon as he would do it. And then that week, his manager called us and said, oh, he can't do it this week. He's going into the hospital. And that was that.
Thanks. Well, I have a guess who your worst interview would be, given that I just listened to the Shecky Green conversation the other day. Hey, do you have a personal favorite thus far?
Oh, ones I actually enjoyed. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are so many. God, there were. I mean, most of them I've really enjoyed. Yeah. I liked Andy Bonaducci when he was on because he's one of those people who has no censor button on him. And I remember there was that famous incident years ago where he picked up a transvestite hooker
yes.
and then proceeded to beat her up in his car. And when I was brought up that, I said, look, I'm sure you're probably tired of talking about this. And he said, no, I'm not tired about that at all. And he went into full detail about what happened, and he didn't care. And Danny Aiello was a fun one. There's so many.
I think one place that your show and the Random Rolls column kind of meet on the flow chart is the tendency to ask about really obscure stuff. Because I was very excited that when I interviewed Gerald McRaney, he had actually been in that exploitation movie that Mickey Dolenz was in, the Keep Off My Grass.
Oh my God! Wow. Yeah, because we interviewed both Mickey Dolenz and Mike Nesmith.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if we could only get Davy Jones.
I think we made a mess up.
Yes.
Peter Tork is an experienced interview.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I look forward to basically it being Shecky Green Part 2.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I know he's got mixed results from people, but I had a horrible experience with him, and I almost never have horrible experiences with anybody.
Yeah, the Shecky Green one, I mean, the whole thing with that one, I remember happened because I was doing something at the Friars Club, and he was supposed to follow me, and then he got outraged, and he said, look, listen to that filth that he's doing, and and a guy whose whole career was in Vegas with gangsters and hookers was deeply offended, and he started storming out, and he threatened to punch, I think, either Freddie Roman or Stewie Stone. And yeah, that was a very. And we tried to interview him, and he said, "Hey, we can't talk about this on the phone. We have to talk in person." And I thought, well, that's what a podcast. And yeah, there's been some strange ones. We interviewed the songwriter Paul Williams.
Oh yeah.
And he was talking about how when he was a kid, his parent, he said his whole family, if you saw them, are all over 6'2". And he said his parents didn't think he was growing fast enough, and they gave him some growth. A doctor recommended these growth injections, which actually stunted his growth.
Wow.
And then he went into talking about how one time he was doing the Mike Douglas show in Philadelphia, and this actor, Peter Lawford, called him and said, please have me on as a guest. And the whole reason was so that he'd have a reason to fly to Philadelphia, where he knew this guy who sold really good coke.
Gotta love a good story.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. With the this is for our random roles feature, and we usually try to go as far back in an actor's on-camera career as we possibly can. I think most people generally perceive your debut as being Saturday Night Live, but based on IMDb, you were, I guess, in a pilot called The Further Adventures of Wally Brown first.
Wow. Yeah, that's I had flown to LA to audition for something else. And that thing I didn't get. And then I had a friend of mine out there who was a comedian that I knew from New York, and he said he's doing this pilot, and they're casting one of the other roles. And he called them and recommended me, and I went in and auditioned, and they liked me and used me, and it was and this is a lesson how showbiz works and how things get made. One of the producers or creators, whatever he was, of this show was a big fan of the song Charlie Brown.
Okay.
And, walks in the
coast.
Yeah. And so he liked that song, so decided to make a TV series out of it. And because there's so much in one song to go on.
Sure.
And so Wally Brown, was this black kid, and he had a white friend, and it was talk about originality. The white friend's father was a cab driver who lived in Queens, who was a bigot, and he had a dingbat wife.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And amazingly, this show didn't take off.
When I was looking through the credits, so there's two things struck me. One was that I guess Peter Scolari was in it.
Yes. Yes, then he later went on to the Bob Newhart show, and most importantly, that one with, was it Perfect? Oh, Bosom Buddies with
Bosom Buddies,
Tom Hanks, which I wonder if Peter Scolari throws darts at pictures of Tom Hanks.
Well, he's popped up in a lot of his movies, so he's probably still pretty tight with him.
Oh, yeah.
Probably in his best interest to be.
Oh, yes.
But the other thing about it is that I guess it was directed by Lowell Gans.
Yes, Lowell Gans, the team of Lowell Gans and Babalu Mandel, and who created a lot of very successful things. And this was not one of them.
What was weird is that I saw the writer was named Barbara Mandel, but it's with 2 L's instead of 1. So I was wondering at first, was that just a typo? They didn't think the guy's real name was Babalu?
And there was also as far as working with people who seem. Oh, you know what? Let me hold on for 1 second.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, that reminded me as far as other people I've worked with who seem to have the Midas touch, but I guess were wearing gloves when they were me. I did what was called a backdoor pilot. Backdoor pilots are when you disguise something as a TV show with the hope that it will become a series. And they do that a lot on series, where all of a sudden, like, it would happen a lot on shows like Married with Children, where all of a sudden Al would say, "Hey, it's my best friend Doug," and the audience would go, "Well, if he's your best friend, how come in all the years of watching this series you never saw him once?" And then Doug would show up, and the characters of Married with Children would pretty much disappear. And they do that with a lot of shows. They'll introduce a character just to see if it's popular enough to make a series. But in this one, they made what was supposed to be a special, and it was called Norman's Corner.
Yeah, I saw that on there.
Yeah, and I was a newsstand owner, and all the wacky people I came in contact with. And now it was written by Larry David, who,
nice.
It's everything else he touched turned to gold. And this I think he was just testing out his pen to see if it wrote. So that was a pretty much forgotten about show, except that when a couple of years later, Jerry Seinfeld was starting his show, wanting to start his show, they said, well, he's creating it with Larry David. And someone on NBC said, Larry David, isn't he that one that wrote that piece of shit for Gilbert Gottfried?
Well, no, I did notice, though, that it seemed to be a Jewish comic's dream as far as the other people in that pilot, because it's like Henny Youngman and, God, who else? At least they're credited as being in it. Arnold Stang.
Yes, and Joe Franklin.
Yeah.
Who was also on my podcast.
He was, yeah, and promptly died, yes.
Yes. It's in the contract when you sign it. You got to look at the small print.
Let's see. This is definitely an obscurity, but I figure there must be some story here. You played the director on The Amazing Live Sea Monkeys.
Yes. That was so that was a show based on less than the song Charlie Brown. It was created by Howie Mandel, and who was also on my podcast.
Still with us.
Yeah.
It's Tuesday. We'll see. I'm
going to have to hit him with a car or something. He's supposed to die right after it. And, but Howie, well, I'll talk about Howie Mandel afterwards because he was a great interview. So this one was based on those ads that they used to sell in the back of comic books for the amazing sea monkeys. And this would be like these underwater creatures, and in the drawings, you'd see these monkeys wearing crowns and holding a staff and a cape, and they'd all have lots of different personalities. And, when you got these things, I never actually bought one, but I had friends who did. And it would be this small plastic tank that was, really small, like the size of a pack of cigarettes, and you looked in it and you saw dots in it. It basically looked like water with insects swimming around in it. And these were the amazing sea monkeys. I don't know if they were brine shrimp or something.
I think that's what I've heard, yeah.
Yeah, and so, you basically, if you strained your eyes and looked, they were even on the sides of the tank, like little circular parts that worked as magnifiers to see these dots better. And, those were... And so Howie Mandel made a series. He did make a series out of it. And he got these 3 guys that they made up to look like the sea monkeys in the ads. And they got in adventures, and they were kind of like the Three Stooges. And, one time they were making a TV show, and I was the director of it. But I remember when we had Howie Mandel on this show, and he was going into full detail about all of his obsessive-compulsive behavior and germaphobe, and he was telling stories about how when he was doing his TV show, he had to shake hands with the guests, and he would, he'd have Purex on the desk that he'd clean his hands with, and then on top of that, it got so extreme that he got that soap that surgeons use before they're about to operate. Like, that's a really strong soap. And he would be constantly washing his hands with that till he started to develop warts all over his hands, because he was killing also the germs that fight off things like warts.
Jeez.
It kills the good germs too. And that was an interesting one.
Let's see. How about Knockus Johnstein, Son of the Beach?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I did 2 of those. That was Howard Stern had I guess it was his production company.
Yeah.
And it was, I forget what channel that was on.
I think it was FX in the pre-quality programming years.
Oh, yes. In the pre-quality program years, I've probably been on every show, on every station. Before the station realized how to make good shows. But Son of the Beach, I actually enjoyed. I mean, I enjoyed watching it, even the ones I wasn't on, because it was, a very kind of, it was a takeoff on Baywatch, and it was like most of the jokes were really like kind of childish, dirty jokes, which I enjoy.
Oh, yeah.
Like, one of the girls' names there was B.J. Cumming. And another one was Porcelain Bidet. And so they were. So in the first one, where I'm Knockus Johnstein, because the lead character's name was Notch Johnson, so I was like this Israeli lifeguard, and I'm wearing full Hasidic-looking beard and hat and pants. And what's fascinating to me about the first episode I did of that was this was pre-September 11th, and we're talking about that, the girls from of the crew get kidnapped and it's a whole terrorist plot that the brother or cousin of Osama bin Laden,
oh, jeez,
yes, is going to drop a bomb on America, and this was back when the general public didn't even know who Osama bin Laden was. And so it was a whole thing on, him, Osama bin Laden committing a terrorist attack. And then, a year, whenever, then it actually did happen. And I thought, if this show had been a serious drama, people would be looking back on it, studying it, but instead it was a silly comedy. But it was, so that amazed me. And there was a subplot where my daughter wants to marry this German lifeguard. And they had this guy who looked and sounded like Arnold Schwarzenegger on the show. And I finally say to him, if you want to marry my daughter, then you'll have to convert to Judaism. And he says to me, is that your final solution? And I said yes, and he converts, and he says, boy, if my father knew I was a Jew, he'd kill me. And then after that one, I returned to this show. A few months later, they asked me, and they wrote another one. This time, once again, I was Nakis Johnstein. Yeah. But I get bitten by this girl vampire, and I become Count Nocula, and so I'm now in the full Dracula outfit, doing my Lugosi imitation during the show.
Can't say it wasn't fun.
Yeah. So those two were actually fun, and I watched. Since then I've watched episodes of it, and the show still makes me laugh.
Yeah. Now, how?
And the girls were hot looking, of course.
Well, sure. Yeah. Well, you obviously became a staple of the Stern Show for a while. How did you and Howard first meet up? Was it just when he had you on as a guest?
Yeah. He just had me on as a guest. And at that point, you could still say to people, that I was doing the Howard Stern Show tomorrow, and people would go, who? And, so he was kind of building a following back then. And, but then later on it exploded, and, he became like the biggest thing on the air. And and it was just like the first time I did it. I don't know, it just, I got laughs on the show, and we seemed to have struck it off. There seemed to have been a chemistry, and I guess in my school report it would have said played well with others. So it got to a point where there were times if I just happened to wake up early in the morning, I would get dressed and walk, and it was a long walk. I'd walk all the way over to where the Stern Show was, and back then you could just I could just walk in the office building, and they'd nod and say hi, and I'd ride up on the elevator and walk into the Stern Show and sit in on the show. And
not a bad deal.
That was fun, and we did. It was a whole. It's so funny that over the years that I'd be remembered for like bits on that, like just various weird things we did, interviews or weird phone calls.
Well, when I put on social media I was going to be talking to you, one of my friends immediately said, "Ask him about his Andrew Dice Clay impression."
Oh yeah. I just, it's really doesn't work in print.
No, it doesn't, but there's a clip I can put on.
Yeah, you could write down, ooh, ah, oh, and what are you, a homo? And ek, and move an imaginary cigarette around. I mean, I remember when Stern had his TV show, he had me on as Andrew Dice Clay, and he supplied a leather jacket that was his, and so I wore that, and it was like wearing a tent on me. And I was there with a cigarette doing Dice Clay throughout the whole show.
And I'm sure as visual a thing as that was, it played great on the radio.
Oh, yes. And I remember one time they sent me out in full Dracula. He always liked when I did Dracula. So they sent me out with a cape and white makeup and a widow's peak and everything. The full Dracula outfit, out on the street with a microphone to ask black people if they thought O.J. was guilty.
Because why not?
Yeah.
Well, I know that Glenn said I had a half hour. Do you have something right after this, or do you have a few more minutes?
Yeah.
I definitely don't want to interrupt anything else you got going on.
Yeah.
Let's see, next one I had was Leo Gerber, Law and Order Special Victims Unit.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that I did 2 episodes, and I was basically that typical character in those shows of the geek who is in the technical department and is by the computer all the time. And what I remember is I went on, the first episode I went on, I did this, I just thought it, like I always do, and everything I work on, I try to improvise stuff and throw in stuff, and I was acting, silly and just making up stuff and getting some laughs from the crew, and then the director walks over to me and he says, could you pull it back a little? This is about a little boy who's been murdered. And then on the second episode I was at, I remember I was backstage getting into makeup, and there was this pretty young actress there who I knew wasn't one of their regular cast. And I said, so are you going to be one of the dead victims on the show? And she said to me, she goes, no, I'm raped, but I live, with a big smile on her face.
Let's see. How about let's see. Not that there's anything to it, but you got to play the Aflac duck in a Lemony Snicket movie.
Oh yes.
How on earth did that come about?
and that one, I was just making regular kind of duck noises, but somehow they were able to fit it in there. And so that was my co-starring role with Jim Carrey.
What was just the gag that they wanted the Affleck duck, or just a duck?
Yeah, I guess it was obviously a tie-in. Like that ad hoc of product placement. Where it's just like where characters in the middle of a movie will go, hey, let's go out and have a Coca-Cola. And another character go, hey, where they have Coca-Cola? At McDonald's. And they go, well, let's put on our Reeboks and walk over there.
Well, I guess it just to touch on it since we're on the subject anyway. As far as the Affleck situation, were you blindsided when they were shocked that you had tweeted something potentially offensive?
Oh yeah. It was like I remember the funniest tweet somebody sent me was they said Affleck fires Gilbert Gottfried after discovering he's a comedian. And it was one of those things like where you go, okay, so they never saw me on stage, never heard me on the radio, never heard of the Aristocrats, never saw any of my specials, never heard my Dirty Joke DVD. So it seemed in a lot of ways a very convenient offense, like they fired me, got loads of free publicity out of it, and then got a guy to imitate my voice for less money, and thus bringing closure to a horrible tragedy. Yeah.
Let's see. How about playing Lewis on Wings?
Oh, yeah. I did about, I guess, 3 episodes of that. Yeah, I was this annoying nephew who had a rich uncle who I was waiting for him to die. And my uncle was played by that actor, William Hickey.
Yeah.
And who was very funny. And if he had stayed around a little longer, he would have been on my podcast, because back then I thought he was going to drop dead in mid-sentence. But he was like great on the show. But boy, when he was off, when the cameras were off, he could barely hold a cup of coffee at that point in his life. But yeah, that was a fun show to do.
Yeah, you guys working together was pretty great, I thought.
Oh yeah, it was fun working with him, because we both. I remember there was one line, because he had like that, really weird voice and way of speaking, and so it was funny when he said, "Oh, my nephew's a nice boy, but he's got that annoying voice."
Let's see. The inevitable one, Saturday Night Live. Obviously, I've read all the books everybody else has, but just for the record, how did you find your way into the cast? Was it just an open audition?
Yeah, just auditions. First, they saw me in the clubs, and then they saw me there a few times. Then they brought me into their offices, and I auditioned there a few times by myself and then with other people. And it's very peculiar when I look back on that, because I'll hear other people talk about it, how they were so nervous and they hated everybody else who was there auditioning because they were in competition. And I don't know why, but for some reason I didn't really care one way or the other. And I was auditioning for it, and I got the part, and when I got it, I wasn't like jumping for joy or celebrating. And it was the worst time to be on the show because it was right after Lorne Michaels and the original cast left. So it was basically like if in the middle of Beatlemania, you got rid of John, Paul, George, and Ringo and announced we've just replaced them with 4 other schmucks, and you're going to like them just as much. And so I remember what was happening is media-wise, before we even made it to the air, people were attacking the show because it was like, how dare they? And which proves you shouldn't be the replacement. You should be the replacement of the replacement. It's kind of like when Howard Stern left the air. If I was running that station, I would have, on the first day of whoever the new guy was, I would have just grabbed anybody off the street and said, okay, you be the host, because they're going to hate him no matter what.
Yeah.
And then once he's gone, then you don't care because you're the replacement of the replacement. You're not the replacement of the main guy.
Right. Well, certainly, like you say, it was critically reviled.
Oh, yeah.
But
yeah.
the musical guests were absolutely amazing that year.
And it was funny because I remember among the reviews, there were a lot of them attacking the musical guests, saying that they get the worst musical guests. And, you know, it was like Prince and
James Brown.
And James Brown, yeah. I mean,
did you have any particular close encounters with the musical artists that stood out?
Not really. I remember one time there was some kind of musician there. I forget which one. They were kind of more like a reggae kind of thing, and it's like you could basically walk within 100 feet of their dressing room and be stoned for the rest of the day.
Well, I know Jimmy Cliff was on there.
Oh, yeah. It was probably his band. Yeah. Yeah, because I remember there being smoke in the hallway, and I was eating a lot of chocolate and potato chips that day.
Well, I know that obviously morale was pretty much at an all-time low, but was there any episode in particular that you can look back on and think, well, we did some pretty decent work?
I'd be hard-pressed to find 1 second, particularly anything I was in. I remember at one point, I think at that lowest point, there was one skit that was called Jack the Stripper. And it was like about Jack the Ripper, but all the male stars were dressed in drag, and the women were dressed as men, and it was about this guy named Jack who doesn't kill people, he flashes himself. And that one was bad.
But at least you were able to go highbrow and do a Polanski imitation at one point.
Oh, yeah. Oh my God, yeah. Yeah, I did a Polanski where I'm pulling a girl in a doorway.
Yeah, that sums up the season in a nutshell, probably.
Yes. But then it was funny when they fired the producer, Gene Domanion.
Yeah.
They wound up keeping as their top writers 2 of the writers from the season where she had hired them, and she wound up keeping Joe Piscopo and Eddie Murphy. They wound up keeping, and those were their main guys. So it was like there was some stuff out of the first that I guess worked.
You see, I would have thought that you would have meshed pretty well with Michael O'Donoghue.
Yeah.
Or maybe.
I don't remember having any real... I don't know if he was there when I even met him. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's see. Actually, tied to the Saturday Night Live stuff, you obviously turned up in Beverly Hills Cop 2. Was that coincidental, or was it
yeah, that was just I auditioned and auditioned a couple of times because Eddie Murphy told me when I showed up on the set that when he looked at the call sheet that day, that's when he first found out I was in the movie. and in that scene where I'm like the financial guy, Sid Bernstein, it was like, I remember me and Eddie were just like improvising back and forth the whole day and just laughing and having a good time. And each time it was different. Each time they shot it. And that turned out great. And that's when everybody started talking about me from that movie.
Oh, wow. And then prior to that, actually, you'd been in a movie with Joe Piscopo, The House of God.
Oh, yes.
Which that cast list is just astounding.
Yeah, the cast list is very impressive. It's a very odd cast. But oh boy, that was based on some book that I think doctors seem to like. That was, based on some guy familiar with the medical profession. And to show you, I remember people ask me, like, what part, people who read the book say, well, which character were you? And I wasn't in the book. And it was one of these things where it was supposed to be a comedy. And at one point, I guess, it was doing so poorly while they were making it and so unfunny. Someone had this brilliant idea, let's just start throwing comedians into it and see if they can do anything, which is a bad sign. And so that film never got released. And I think I saw it once on like cable at 4:00 in the morning, and it's just a mess.
It's a shame we didn't at least get an Oscar nod for special makeup effects for Charles Hayden's hair.
Oh, yes.
My Lord. How about the whole Problem Child saga, including, I guess, animated series as well?
Oh, yeah. That one I auditioned for, got it. And I was the adoption agency worker. And that one, even while we were making it, I think everyone involved thought this was going to be a bomb. And I remember when my filming was through and I was going home, I was saying goodbye to John Ritter, and he was like kind of looking around, shrugging his shoulders, going, well, you know the way it is in the business. You do something, and then you go on to the next thing. Like, I think he thought it would be a failure. And people involved at Universal were saying something like, one of them said, we're going to treat this like a wounded soldier on the battlefield. Leave him there to die and run and save our own asses. And then, amazingly, the movie, people loved it, and it became like a major hit that no one was expecting. And I mean, so that became the surprise hit. I think it became Universal's biggest hit that year.
Wow.
And that spawned a sequel that was also a big hit. It made a cartoon series. And hello.
Yep.
Oh yeah. I heard a click. It made a cartoon series that looked if you find any copies of that, it looks like it was made for 12 cents. And then it was even I'm the only one who seems to know about this one. They made a TV movie. And I think I was the only person from the original cast. They had a different kid, and John Ritter wasn't there. And it was like William Catt from Greatest American Hero played the father. But I'm the only one who seems to know about that one.
Actually, only because I have the Wikipedia page up right now. I guess Jack Warden was also in that one, too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't have... See, now, Jack Warden is one of those people, had he lived, I would have loved to have had him on my podcast.
Oh, yeah.
Because he was one of those actors. He was like one of those, like so many of those actors, these supporting players who could do comedy and drama, back and forth, it doesn't matter. Throw them in a Western, throw them in a detective thing, and they just do their job. And they're great at it.
Yeah, he actually strikes me as being a lot like the recently late Robert Loggia, who probably would have been a good guest, too.
Oh, yeah. He would have been terrific.
Let's see. This was asked about by more people than any other role. Adolf Hitler, Highway to Hell.
Oh, God. The credit, Gilbert Gottfried as Hitler, is actually much funnier than the actual scene. When you watch the scene, you go, whatever. So it's not worth sitting through the scene, and definitely not worth sitting through the movie. But, yeah, that credit is funny. It's kind of like my credit in... I love to watch the closing credits of A Million Ways to Die in the West because it says Abraham Lincoln, Gilbert Gottfried. And it was funny because I remember with that movie, with A Million Ways to Die in the West, they said, do I want to be in the credits, because I guess some actors feel like they're too much above something, maybe of the small part they didn't. That actually winds up, I'm so glad I'm in the credits, because that part makes me laugh, and that was fun. But I remember that Highway to Hell. Also, a lot of people were in that. I think the entire Stiller and Mira family were in that.
Yeah, it looks like it.
And there was this actor who at that time looked like he was going to be the next big thing. This Patrick Bergen. And he was in a movie with Julia Roberts, Sleeping with the Enemy. And but yeah, that was also pretty much a mess.
I'm asking about this actually for my daughter. What the combo is, not the first part of it.
Yeah.
But you were part of Thick of the Night.
Oh, yeah. Another tremendous success, which I'm sure everybody has a box set of.
Come on, Shout Factory, come through for us.
Yeah, Alan Thicke was supposed to be, they were advertising him as the guy who was going to knock Johnny Carson off the air. And right now, Johnny Carson is not on the air, so it worked.
There you go.
Yeah. But, yeah,
and yet
that was a mess.
Now, was that a case where you saw the writing on the wall right off the bat?
Oh,
or did it just...
yeah, it just looked like... I remember the funniest thing about... Well, when they start getting new ideas and changing stuff. There's the classic reboot word used, and they kept changing things. Like at one point, they came up with an idea that I would go from being one of their resident cast of zanies in the skits to a guy who lived up in the catwalk. and that was sure funny. And then it was like, I remember the funniest thing was unintentionally funny, and that was that one of their sponsors was for a women's sanitary napkin, and it was advertising how thin it was, how it could fit under your clothes and not show. And it said, once you try it, you'll never go back to thick.
But I guess you must have either forgiven Alan Thicke or learned to love the series because he was on your show and you were on his show.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's the way it works in the business. It's like unless somebody dies, you'll be with them again.
I'm home stretch here. Got to ask about playing Johnny Crunch, Adventures of Ford Fairlane.
Oh yeah. Also, I auditioned for it, and I remember also they were very loose about me improvising stuff during the scene, and that one failed miserably when it came out, and all the scathing reviews. But it built like a cult following over the years. And I always have people come up to me saying that's one of their favorites.
Now, I meant to ask this earlier. What was Dice's reaction to your impression of him?
Yeah, I don't know. He never said anything, really, so no.
I guess the other question then would be, have you talked to him since?
Yeah, maybe he didn't realize that it was an impression of him.
It's too close.
Yeah, I've run into him like a handful of times, but not that much.
Okay. Then I have to ask about Iago, Aladdin.
Yeah, that was one of the few quality productions I was involved with. And, auditioned for it. I remember I also, played around with the dialogue and everything, and then for the longest time, hadn't heard anything, and then they said they wanted me. And, I did that, and I've heard a million stories about how crazy it was and what a scene it was when me and Robin would be recording together, and I never ran into him once during the making of that movie.
Well, I saw the clip of you with the autistic boy. That was very moving.
Oh yeah, that was. It shows I could do nice things if I'm not responsible for them. Because I found out, there was an article in the New York Times where this guy, Ron Suskind, who had an autistic son. And I think the son was about 6 or whatever. And he had never spoken to him. They couldn't speak together. And one time at Annie, where they went to different therapists and whatnot, but the kid would watch cartoons, and particularly he liked Disney, and one of his particular favorites was Aladdin, that he knew every line of dialogue in. And so, just going for broke, the father had a puppet of my character, Iago, and he put it on, and he started imitating my voice. and he said to his son, "How are you?" And the son looked at the parrot and said, "I'm not happy. I don't have any friends." And from then on, that's what got them speaking.
Wow.
And, so then he came out when we were doing the Night of Too Many Stars. That's an autism benefit that Robert Schmeigel does. And they even did a documentary that, because at one point, they filmed me because the class that this Owen is in, that's his name, is a class for like kids with autism, and they were putting on a production of Aladdin, and I just walked in the middle of it and started doing the voice, and they all started cheering when I came in.
Now, how surprised were you by his reaction on stage and his, grabbing hold and running with it?
Oh, yeah, he was great. He knew the dialogue better than I did.
And proved it.
Yeah, exactly. And the crowd loved it. I mean, it was one of the definite high points.
Do you have a favorite project you've worked on over the years that didn't get the love you thought it deserved?
Oh God, I think I've had some that did much better than I thought they deserved.
Nothing leaps to mind as particularly underrated, though?
Underrated? I don't know. It's like you could never tell. Like when I'm working on certain things that I'll think, oh, this is going to be a major hit. This is going to be something. And then it turns out to be nothing. And then every now and then you could get pleasantly surprised when something's a big hit that you weren't expecting anything out of, which doesn't happen that often.
What were your expectations for Hot to Trot?
I was writing out my Academy Award speech and trying on tuxedos to see which one would look best on camera. And I'm still heartbroken that didn't get the accolades it deserved.
I will say that I did this feature with Dabney Coleman, and he still seems as mystified by the film now as he was then.
Oh, yes. And another person in that was Buck Henry.
Oh, yeah.
And I ran into him some years later, and I said, oh, we were in a movie together. And he looked at me with a disgusted look on his face, and he just goes, HTT. Like he couldn't even say the name of it.
And then I guess for one of our writers, I have to ask about this one. You were a guest on the Insane Clown Posse Theater.
Oh my God, yeah.
How did you hook up with those guys in the first place? Because that wasn't your first encounter with them.
Yeah. Once again, they asked me. And I said, "Oh, all right." And that turned out to be fun. It was insane, as it says in the title.
Sure.
And then a while later, I was asked to do the festival, whatever, of the Juggalos.
Right, yeah. Gathering, yeah.
Yeah, the gathering of the Juggalos. That's all involved in that. And what I remember about that was, my agents were saying, well, take the money and just hope for the best. And so I flew out there. I was at a hotel. And then they picked me up to drive me to the event. And they're driving a long time. And then all of a sudden, we just wind up driving up a dirt road. And I remember thinking, oh, they're just going to take me somewhere and kill me. and then when I saw the event, what it looked like, and everyone's there in these weird, scary clown outfits and stuff, and all other kinds of weird people, and like a rock festival taking place in hell. And
you were still convinced they were going to kill you.
Yeah, I thought, oh, this is it. This is where I die. And I'd heard so many horror stories about it. And the idea that I did as well as I did, I don't know that I put it on my reel, but the idea actually, not so much doing well, but I survived it and didn't die. Like, I think I once heard something where someone's advice when they were going into the army and going into battle was, just don't die, and I didn't, and they seemed to enjoy it actually. And I remember where they had me staying, it was like some kind of trailer with no bathroom, so I'd have to go outside on the other and pee against the side of the trailer, and yeah. I remember whenever I would say a name, they would say, it was basically a fuck them thing. So I said something, whatever, about Frank Sinatra. And they go, fuck Frank Sinatra. They all start chanting that. And then so I started putting names there where I just go, hey, anybody here watch the Merv Griffin show? Which hadn't been on for years. And they all started chanting, thousands of them, fuck Merv Griffin. And then I said, he used to have on Zsa Zsa Gabor a lot. And then, like, these thousands of these people all start chanting, fuck Zsa Zsa Gabor.
Now that, actually, you might want to put on your reel.
Yes.
Then I'd say this more or less for last, but you were on, I guess, the highest rated episode of The Cosby Show.
Oh, yes. Back when it was an honor.
Exactly.
that you were working with Bill Cosby. Now it's kind of like saying I was on the Charles Manson Comedy Hour. Yeah, Cosby, it turns out, I went in on the audition, but even before I read anything, they said Bill was looking for this guy that was used to appear a lot on MTV and stuff like that, and that was me. And I said, yeah, that's me. And they drove me right from the audition to the show, and it turns out Cosby, I had heard before, even when I was on Thick of the Night, that he was a fan of mine, because I also like to drug women and rape them afterwards.
Oh, sure.
It's just something, it's a hobby of mine.
Sure.
And,
I set you up. I knew what I was getting into.
Oh,
Carry
yeah.
on.
So yeah, I did the show, which was already a hit show, and for some reason or other, that episode, it wound up in the papers as being the most watched sitcom in the history of television, the most watched episode of a sitcom in the history of television.
Wow. And then I guess you must have stayed in good with the Cosby Camp because you were on A Different World, and I think you were on an episode of just his show Cosby, but they don't actually list a character for you, so I can't really tell for sure.
Oh, yeah, I was on another, when he came back with that other show, that was a peculiar show where he was an unemployed airport worker or something, and same wife, but none of the others.
Yeah. Do you have a recollection of what you played?
Yeah, I at one point through a series of, mix-ups. Cosby and this other guy wind up in jail. Also foreshadowing. And I'm just some crazy person in jail.
Just real quickly, I ask you, you worked with Rodney Dangerfield in two of his relatively later films, but I would guess just as a stand-up, you would probably run into him prior to that.
Yeah, I had run into him a lot. He used to come into the clubs a lot to try out new stuff. He was constantly working on, like, new stuff that he'd be trying out. And he used me for two of his films, and, unfortunately, neither one of them was Gone with the Wind. And, one was The Further Adventures of Wally Brown that I'm in for, like, about 12 seconds. And then one that I'm in a little bit longer was his monster hit Back by Midnight, which was never made it to theaters. I don't even think ever made it to VHS or Beta. And I've never even seen it, so...
I've only seen the cover. I've not been able to bring myself to actually rent it or watch it.
Yeah. I don't know if anyone could find a copy of it.
Someone said I should ask you to tell the Aristocrats, and I said I don't have the money to pay him the performance fee.
Yeah.
But obviously you seem to be having a ball delivering it in the film.
Yeah. That one, Penn Jillette asked me to do it, and I did it for no money, making it Penn Jillette's greatest magic trick. and then, the film, I when they asked me to do it, I thought this is going to be, Penn and Paul Provenza will be able to watch this in their living room. I didn't think anything was happening there. And then the movie actually came out, and, beyond anything I could have predicted, made it into theaters. It actually was in movie theaters all over the place, and I was getting so much attention from that, and people were singling me out from it, and that was one of those pleasant surprises, because one critic wrote of the 100 or more comedians in the film, no one is more disgusting than Gilbert Gottfried. And I take that as a badge of honor.
Well, I will actually let that be the closer, but just before I go, because someone asked me to ask about it, if there is a story to be told. You were in an episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark with Ryan Gosling.
Yes, meaning that episode had two of the sexiest men in the world.
Sure.
And, Ryan Gosling was about 3. I don't know, he was a kid. And, it was like kind of I remember it was like a children's Twilight Zone, Are You Afraid of the Dark? And it's one of those another one of those shows that I didn't think anybody was really paying attention, and I still get people coming up to me a lot saying how they were big fans of that show and remember that episode. And
it's amazing how multi-generational your career is.
It is very weird. Yeah. And I'm still hoping that Ryan Gosling will send over some of his sloppy seconds to me.
Now, I know Cyber Chase just had some new episodes come out. Is that still a going concern? I mean,
that's one of those shows that doesn't die. And it's a fun show to do, and it's so weird because it's like people come up to me and they'll tell me that their kids watch it, and their math has gotten better, and they enjoy the problem solving on the show. And it's so funny because I was the absolute worst student in the world. And it's because it's on PBS, it's one of those shows where whenever they gather, whenever they crash their piggy bank and find out they have enough coins to make a new one, they make a new one. And so sometimes years will pass and they'll call me up and go, guess what? We can make a new one. I'll go, okay.
Yeah, you certainly have done plenty of voice work. I know you, at least one thing of note, you played Mr. Mixelplick.
Yeah. That was about 2 or 3 episodes of, I did about 2 or 3 episodes of the cartoon series of Superman, where Tim Daly was Superman.
Yeah.
And that was a fun cartoon to do. And then I did 2 or 3 episodes of the TV series Superboy, where I was Knick-Knack, the master of toys.
Were those entertaining gigs? I mean, are you a superhero guy at all?
I'm not a major superhero fan. I remember I would watch the old Superman series.
Yeah.
But with George Reeves. But no, I don't remember ever being a major superhero fan. But those were fun to do.
All right, I've tortured you enough.
Okay.
You had to put on the receiving end of this one of these days. So hopefully this felt like the flip side of your own podcast.
Oh yes.
Well, I will tell you that I'm hoping that I might actually be able to get on the phone with Phil Collins because he's releasing some reissues. If I do that, I may send Glenn an email to see if I can hop on the phone with you to talk about that video.
Oh my God!
I won't worry about doing it now. I'll save it.
The Phil Collins special. Wow. And I just say my podcast, the name of it, Amazing Colossus.
Well, it's going to lead it off definitely.
And you could subscribe on iTunes and it's GilbertPodcast.com or my regular website's GilbertGottfried.com, and Twitter is @RealGilbert.
Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, thank you for enduring this.
Sure.
As you can see, I enjoy doing my research. So,
yeah, you definitely did.
Well, I sent a tweet to Frank yesterday, and I said I've dug deep and I'm pulling this Lowell Gans thing out. And he was like, "Oh my God."
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Have fun. Excellent. All right, well, Gilbert, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. I'll send you the link and tag you on it when it goes live.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good one.